I started my professional career on a manual typewriter, and here we are writing stories that are now we're downloading to our phones. So I'm just really curious to see where the technology is going to take us.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Tyke.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from Joe Steiniger and Mary McDonald in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
Quick, what are some of the well-known and well-traveled places across the North Country? Lake Placid, the Thousand Islands, Lake George, Lake Champlain, Johnsburg, Weavertown? All right, so maybe those last two aren't necessarily on the beaten path, but maybe that could be changing. There's a team working to create an app that will automatically tell you the stories of these lesser-known places while you're walking or driving through them. And in some ways, it could redefine what it means to go on a tour. It's part of an innovative partnership between Warren County, where Sarah Frankenfeld works, and the company Dan Forbush founded, Cliff and Redfield Interactive. The project they're undertaking is called the First Wilderness Story Collaboration, and its goal is to help put some of these places back on the map, figuratively, if not literally. Dan and Sarah joined us to talk about the project. Welcome to Northwards.
Thanks for inviting us.
Great to be here.
Dan, how do you describe what this collaboration is and what it's about?
I would describe it as a collaboration of local historians, students, and editors who, using collaborative media, tell interesting stories. We have been developing stories from open space as our main platform for content over the last 7 years or so. And now we're moving into spatial storytelling, that is using media that just enable us to tell stories in a different way, especially now, and most interestingly, I think, driving around Warren County. That is, the ability to summon stories to our phones is really transformative and prompting us to think about storytelling in an entirely new way.
Well, and it sounds like as I was doing research for this interview, you're just a curious guy because I was reading an essay you wrote about a fateful ski trip to Gore Mountain that you took that I gather was at least partly the inspiration for some of this work and how the idea of spatial storytelling kind of intersected with the technology that you're trying to put to use.
Right. Well, the visit to Gore Mountain was fairly recent and part of our planning. We have the challenge of telling stories all over Western Warren County, and how will we fit Gore Mountain into that? The 90th anniversary of the first snow train is coming up next year, so we're thinking, how do we tell the story of how skiing came to North Creek? And so what points of interest all over Gore Mountain are we going to want to spotlight and tell stories about? So that's one key piece of the big picture.
And another piece of the big picture is how to put GIS work to use in telling these and sharing these stories, really. And that's, I think, the most exciting thing that I gather is still coming together and isn't quite ready for the user experience yet, but it's what you're working on, this app that will allow people to hear stories as they move around Warren County.
Right, and Sarah is really taking the lead on that. She really knows GIS, and so she's really getting to know this new app that we're developing. We're developing the narrative component, and she's pioneering the technical aspect of it that's going to enable people to download these stories to their phones.
Yeah, so I am the Geographic Information System Administrator for Warren County, so my whole career has been relating to maps and spatial data. And we fairly early on in this project realized that it's a effective way to drive people to visit some of these out of the way places by tying stories to specific locations. So the software that we use regularly as part of our day-to-day work has a component called story maps. So that allows a desktop application or mobile-friendly application to have a location on a map that you can use using GPS on your phone and tie that to additional information. So we have a recreation mapper application that we launched a number of years ago that's been really successful, that highlights all of the public land recreation destinations in Warren County. But we realized that we could expand that to include some additional narrative so that we're actually telling stories about various different locations in Warren County, whether they be recreation destinations, so hikes or paddles, bike rides, or historic destinations throughout the county. And then recently, we have just ventured into the land of GPS triggered audio. So that is what we're currently exploring and looking forward to launching in an app. One of the challenges that we have is, as in much of the North Country, large swaths of Warren County do not have cell service. So we wanted to make sure that this app will work without requiring cell service. We've tested it. It works really well. So we're really excited about the possibility of people driving around the county and being able to hear stories about the locations that they're driving past or walking. We'll have options for walking tours as well.
So a couple of questions occur to me. I mean, like one of them is just this notion that you're really trying to share some love with some out-of-the-way places that are really in the shadow of more famous tourist attractions in the region, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first Wilderness Heritage Corridor, which is how Dan and I originally got connected, it was a planning initiative started by the Warren County Planning Department in the late 1990s to try to exactly just that, give some love to some of these less known communities in the western part. So these are communities that border the upper Hudson River. So Stony Creek, Thurman, Lake Luzerne, Warrensburg, Johnsburg, Chestertown. They all border the Hudson River. They're in the west part of the county, much lower in population, not necessarily tourism destinations with the exception of, Johnsburg with Gore, but they have a huge amount to offer, both in more off the beaten path recreational opportunities, as well as a rich historic past. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to get to tell those stories while people are actually physically in those locations.
Well, and so then the other question I have, and this is, Dan, where you come in, is what kind of audio you're collecting and who's doing the collecting and how you're presenting it.
Well, it's a big challenge. Okay, so we're creating this network of stories around Western Warren County. We're going into the histories that have been written about this area. We're talking to the historians. We're connecting with those historians in Zoom and in Basecamp, which is the main project management tool that we're using. We have a team of 8 students that are helping us to research and write these stories. We're aiming to begin recording these histories around mid-May, but we've got to get the scripts written. So that's our main focus right now, is writing the scripts, and then we have to assign the various parts that will be read by the historians that agree to participate in the project. So there are a lot of moving parts to it, but it's moving along well.
This is a little like Ken Burns with location services turned on.
Yeah, it feels a lot like we're writing documentaries in sound.
I mean, it's a fascinating idea. I mean, are you creating this out of whole cloth? Is this being done elsewhere?
So we're using an app called Story. So this app is used by the National Park Service. Primarily, its largest client is museums. So it is used for audio tours in museums that typically are, generated as people are moving from an exhibit to exhibit. But it is also used in various national parks. So that is what attracted us to this particular app, because we figured if it works in a national park, it should hopefully also work in the rural Adirondacks. And that has proved to be true.
Do you have the sense who your users are going to be? Are you hoping that this will bring people to Western Warren County, or people who are already familiar with the area will find, I guess, more to do when they're there?
Yeah, I hope both. I think that it's likely that visitors coming to Lake George, we're hoping, will download the app and think, oh, there are things to do more than just right in Lake George Village or right in the lake. We're hoping that we'll be able to entice them to visit the western part of the county.
The less saltwater taffy intensive part of the county.
Exactly. That being said, we are hoping that eventually that this is going to cover all of Warren County, especially as we're moving into the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Revolution. We have a lot of relevant activities that did occur right in Lake George area, and we're planning that this app will also incorporate audio tours, both driving and walking tours, highlighting that Revolutionary War era history as well. That's kind of the next phase of tour development.
What makes the two of you the most excited about the possibilities?
Yeah, so we did, I don't know if you're aware of our letterboxing projects from the last couple of years, but we have had these two letterboxing trails, which basically are like a kind of a treasure hunt where people follow clues, go to specific locations throughout the county, get a stamp at that location. And those two initiatives, which started out very small, and we didn't really have much in the way of expectations. For the first one was the first wilderness letterboxing trail. We were astounded by the response to that project. And one of the most frequent comments was, I've been coming to Lake George every year for 30 years, and I had no idea this was here. I'm so happy to learn more about the history of this particular location, or I'm so happy to know that this location exists as a destination. So we heard that both from visitors who either it was their first time coming to the area, or they've been coming, year after year for their whole lives. We also heard that from local residents who do live here in Warren County and still discovered places right in their backyard that they had never known about before. So I feel like we have such a rich both historical story to tell here in Warren County, as well as so many recreational resources that people just don't know about. So I'm really hoping that this app will be a way to let people explore off the beaten path locations in Warren County and just learn more about our amazing history.
Well, and it must be really gratifying to be able to marry that hope with your expertise in GIS.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's really fun. It's just an exciting use of the technology that is, a lot different than assigning addresses or mapping road center lines or whatever, normal parts of our job. It's really fun to get to use the technology for something a little bit more innovative.
I would just say it's really great to work with Sarah on this because she knows the technology. And so what I'm looking to get out of this is just to see where the technology leads us. It's quite incredible. I started my professional career on a manual typewriter, and here we are writing stories that are now, we're downloading to our phones. So I'm just really curious to see where the technology is going to take us.
I will concede that if you could see through the door behind me into my office, you would still see a manual typewriter.
Really?
Well, I have it because I love it. It's not because I have to use it.
They're fun.
That is amazing. I have one in my basement, but I'm just keeping it as a souvenir of the old days.
If I buy another manual typewriter, my wife will kick me out of the house. But listen, Sarah Frankenfeld and Dan Forbush, thank you both so much, and best of luck with this. Looking forward to hearing tales of the app in action.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dan Forbush is the founder and editor of Cliff and Redfield Interactive, and Sarah Frankenfeld is the GIS administrator for Warren County. They're partnering on the first Wilderness Story collaboration, and they hope to launch the app that's at the heart of it around the 4th of July weekend. There is more information at ncpr.org/northwards. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Northwards. I'm Mitch Tyke. I hope you enjoyed our interview, and you can catch new content every Friday right here or wherever you get your podcasts. Find out more about Northwards and NCPR on our mobile app or at our website, ncpr.org. And while you're there, make a donation to support everything you hear on North Country Public Radio.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The program is written, recorded, and edited by Mitch Dyke with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Music by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.